talk a lot about the framework of the four C's. Can you tell me why you think these four C's are so important in a man's life and how that framework works in the real world?
Yeah. So, I mean, I've talked before about where I think the four C's come from in terms of the wounds that happened to masculinity and how that manifested in men being isolated and therefore needing more connection. Um, Not feeling that there was any real challenge anymore. So, needing healthy challenge. Not feeling that the work they do or what the gifts they have to bring to their communities matter. So therefore, they need a greater sense of contribution and celebration. Both celebrating and being celebrated is very low. So men need these. So I'm not going to talk too much in this video about what the four C's are and where they've come from. I'm going to look more about how we implement them into our lives and how. And that's really a staged journey of the four C's. We have to bring them in. Like everything, it starts with me. So the journey, I believe, of men's personal development is one of self to the world at large. So first of all, we have to start with self. We have to get self in order. Then we have to work on our families, get our families in order. Then we have to work on our communities, get our communities thriving, and then we can work on the world. People tend to jump to different stages of that. I'll meet men who are obsessed with huge activities and movements that they want to be a part of, that want to change the world, and yet their house ain't even really in order. They don't have resources. Things are dysfunctional. Their health ain't right. Whatever it is. And so I don't think you can ignore any of the steps of self, family, community, world. So let's start with self. If we start with self, then we have to run through the four C's. So first of all, connection. So first stage, self. How am I connected to myself? That means, do I take time to be with myself? Do I understand my emotions? Am I in control of my self-talk? How's my discipline? It's self. How am I connected to self? Then it's how am I connected to myself physically, right? So first of all, if we're going self, let me backtrack slightly. If we're starting with connection, then we have to start with self. And we need to go through that in terms of the pies model, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. So what I'm really giving here is a framework of how to move from self to family, to community, to the planet. And we do that by looking at connection first. And we do that connection to self physically. How am I connected to self? Do I spend time with my own body? Do I look after my own body? Do I feed my body well? Do I do all of those things? Intellectually, how am I connected to self? Do I take time to indulge my passions? Do I take time to think about the things that are important to me? Do I understand what's important to me in terms of my values and the thoughts and beliefs that I hold? Then it's emotionally. How do I connect to myself emotionally? Do I understand my emotions? When I'm feeling anger, sadness, fear, and joy, am I aware of what they are? Am I aware of if it's a disproportionate emotion? So therefore, where does that come from? So taking time to really understand how I feel and how my feelings are then reflected out onto the world. And then spiritually is a very complicated term because I'm not religious in that way. So when I talk about spirituality, I talk about everything that we can't measure, but somehow we know it's there. So social connection for me is spirituality. A connection to a bigger sense of meaning is spiritual to me. Friendships are spiritual to me because we can't measure them, but somehow we know it's a connection that's going on. So how am I connected spiritually? Do I feel like I'm part of something bigger than self? Do I hold a vision to something bigger than self? And how often do I come to connect with that? You know, once I'm working those bits out of connection, then I can move really to challenge. You know, and then we go through the pies model again. Am I connecting? Am I challenging myself physically? You know, am I pushing myself? Am I being the best version of myself physically that I could be? I want to be? Intellectually, am I challenging myself? Am I stagnating? Or am I actually learning new things? Continuous growth to stimulate the mind. Emotionally, am I challenging myself? You know, am I willing to sit in uncomfortable feelings? Am I willing to do uncomfortable things that may bring up uncomfortable feelings if they're beneficial to me? And am I challenging myself spiritually? Am I taking chances to find more connection? Am I taking chances to connect to a bigger meaning? Am I exploring what different things are out there? Or have I just changed? Have I just settled? So then we move on to contribution. You know, how am I contributing to myself? Am I building the resources that I need so that I can feel that I'm happy? So how am I contributing to myself physically? And physically, it just don't mean my body, like am I eating well, am I doing all that? Physical means anything that can be measured. So even just down to practicalities, like do I have enough money coming in? You know, can I take care of my future in that way? Those are physical practicalities that we need to get in order in some way to be able to thrive. Am I contributing to myself intellectually? Right? Am I reading shit? Is the music I'm listening to the sort of messages that I want to feed into my brain all day, every day? Emotionally, am I contributing to myself? Am I taking time to be kind to myself? Am I taking time to feel joy? When I feel anger, do I bottle it away? And spiritually, am I connecting to myself? Do I have any form of spiritual practice that helps me? Do I meditate? Do I do ice baths? Whatever it is that brings you to a sense of spiritual connection. If you're religious, are you praying regularly? Are you going to church? Are you doing those things that feed you spiritually? And then we get to celebration. You know, am I celebrating myself physically? That means, do I enjoy my body? You know, that can mean am I getting enough sexual gratification in my life for self? Also, am I just enjoying my physicality? Am I going dancing? Am I going doing those things? Intellectually, you know, am I celebrating myself? Am I taking time to put ideas out into the world that I want to? Am I acknowledging myself for the learning I'm doing, or is it just an endless brain dump? Emotionally, spiritually, so it goes on. You know, but the important bit is we follow a framework. So we start with self, we move through connection, challenge, contribution, celebration. Once we've done all those things, our house is kind of in order. Like we're in order, we're in good shape. You know, and yes, if it's to be, it starts with me, but it has to quickly become we. So then it's about moving on to family. You know, then it's about getting a situation where your own house is in order. So if you have a partner, right, are you connecting with them? Are you challenging them? Are you contributing to their life? Are you celebrating them? You know, if you have children, are you contributing to their lives? Are you celebrating them? Are you being celebrated by them? Are you challenging them? You know, we keep going through those C's and we move through that pies again. Like in your family, physically, are you connecting to them? Are you contributing to them? Are you challenging them? Are you celebrating them? Intellectually, are you challenging those people in your house? Are you contributing to them? It's simple stuff, but it just creates an order in which to do it because you become well-rounded through it. If you take family and you've worked through the 4 C's and you've worked through it in a pies model, that means that everyone close around you, physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually, are connecting with you, are being challenged by you and able to challenge you, which is really important. You're contributing to them and having them contribute to you, and you're being celebrated with and celebrated by. That's a pretty good place. By the time you've got to there, you're in good shape, and now your house is in order. So then now let's take a look outside. Let's look at our communities, the communities that we're part of. Are we connecting with those communities physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually? Are we challenging those communities physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually? Are we contributing to those communities physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually? And are we celebrating those communities physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually? And there's various ways we can do that. And on this, on this channel and in these videos, we'll be going into that in a lot of detail. But, if we just pick a few of those, like if we go community and we say contributing, are you the person in that community who reaches out to others and sees they're okay? If you look at your neighborhood, let's take your neighborhood as an example. Let's take your area, for example. Physically, are you contributing to your neighborhood, to your area? Are you making it a better place? Physically, do you drop litter? Or do you pick litter up? If something needs done, do you do it? Is that the sort of man that you want to show up as? It's the sort of man that I want to show up as. Intellectually, am I sharing what knowledge I have with those around me? Am I challenging them to up their game intellectually if that feels appropriate? Emotionally, do I know who my neighbour is? Am I taking time to have a coffee with that person who's isolated? And spiritually, which for me is around connection again, am I contributing to my community in a way that's bigger than me, in a way that isn't about what I will get out of it, in a way that could maybe outlast me? These are the questions that we should ask ourselves around the communities we're involved with. And that can be our area communities. It can also be those areas of interest we're in. I skate, right? And so I do a lot of skating with guys who are my age. It's much more than just skateboarding, right? So I have a responsibility as a member of that community to challenge and be challenged by, to connect with and to allow connection, to contribute to, give what I can, take what I need. We can really make the world a better place by following these things through, by us being the best version of ourselves we can be. That's a really great start. By having a family that supports and nurture that growth, and you support and nurture that in them, and then to take that out to your community so that you're actually an active contributing member that drives connection, celebration, and challenging contribution in those areas of your life and encourages the others to do the same. You can actually make your physical area a much better and happier and more joyful and full of meaning place. Then when we're there, we're resourced up. We have resources. We've built resources for us, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. We're resourced in those areas. That resource is supported by and amplified our family, physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. We then have communities. So we have a network of people that we can work with to show up in the world and to create the world as we want it to be. And we can resource and be resourced by those communities physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Then we have half a chance of making the world a better place. We've already rippled out, and now we have all of those resources flowing up so we can get to a stage where we can go, okay, that's the problem that I want to help solve. How am I contributing to the world by my existence physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually? That's a big question to ask yourself. I mean, just think about that as a question and just think, let me just sit down and answer that question. How am I contributing to this world? How am I connecting to this world, first of all? Physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Is it how I want? If not, how do I want it? Write it down. How do I want it? How am I challenging the world? Physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Is it what I want? Write it down. How am I contributing to the world? I mean, that's a beautiful question to ask yourself. How am I contributing to this world beyond me? Physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. And then the last one, which I find is a really beautiful question to ask, which is, how am I celebrating this world physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually? When was the last time you took time to celebrate this world? And I often say this to people, like, if this didn't exist, if this world we had didn't exist and we could buy it as a simulation, like, there is no amount of money you wouldn't pay. We're already in the most beautiful simulation that has ever been created, right? Some people will say it's a simulation, whatever it is. We're in the most beautiful surrounding it can be. And we're looking for more in here, or in substances, or in purchases, when we have it all. So I think the end goal is world, but it has to start with self. And we can't jump through those phases, I don't think. That's the personal development journey, from self, family, community, planet. Connecting to physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Challenging physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. Contributing to physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. And celebrating physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually. 4 C's.